Hi, welcome to Christadelphianvideo.org. Thoughts on the Bible readings: 1 Kings 17, Jeremiah 43, 1 Corinthians 1, 2, for August 22nd. 1 Kings 17 abruptly introduces us to Elijah the Tishbite, who without fanfare or family connections, bursts upon the evil Ahab with words of doom. There will be no rain until Elijah declares it. The prophet is sent to Zarephath, the territory of wicked Jezebel, in Tyre and Zidon. The Bible records that her evil surpassed that of her husband. It is in her territory that Elijah the prophet providentially succors and protects God's faithful prophet. Elijah's failure to find support in Israel is typical of our Lord Jesus Christ. See his comments on this in his hometown of Nazareth. Luke 4 verses 22 to 26. Read and meditate. Elijah is miraculously cared for by ravens, unclean birds, and in a time of famine when the birds could scarcely find food for themselves and their chicks. The ravens gave their food to the prophet. When the brook at Cherith dried up, God sent the prophet to a faithful widow, who shows her trust in the God of Israel by obeying the demands of Elijah, by giving the morsels of food that was left, or remained, for herself and her son to Elijah. This was done in faith, and without the care of the Almighty she and her son would certainly die. After this, the record tells us that our Father's power was evidenced in the raising of the widow's son. Jeremiah and the residue of Judah were forcibly taken to Tapanhes in Egypt, where archaeological evidence of this occurrence has been recently recovered. The prophet was instructed to take stones and enact a parable, which demonstrated the coming judgment of Nebuchadnezzar on the people here when that despot would break the obelisks of Heliopolis and desecrate its temples. The letters to the Corinthians begin in the same way as every epistle of Paul prior to his first imprisonment in Rome. Grace, charis, the Greek greeting, and peace, shalom, the Hebrew welcome. What more could be offered any believer than the grace and peace of the Father? The letters written between the two imprisonments contain the added dimension of mercy, something we become more conscious of needing the older we get. The only exception to this pattern is in Paul's personal letter to Philemon. What wonderful words were told to the Corinthian readers, that by the Father's calling they were saints, or sanctified believers, incorporated into the fellowship of God and His beloved Son. The Apostle informs his readers about the tragedy of forming factions. Christ's ecclesia, his body, cannot be divided into segments which follow human leaders. For that reason, notwithstanding the essential nature of baptism, Paul was thankful to have baptized only a few. The apostle's prime focus was on forwarding the message of the gospel. The essence of that message lay in the power of the preaching of Christ's crucifixion. Read aloud and ponder verses 18 to 31. The last of those verses cite Jeremiah 9 verses 23-24. The reader will notice how the apostle develops the theme from Jeremiah and consider the masterful conclusion in verses 30 to 31. How thankful are we that the Father has called weak and ordinary people such as ourselves to His kingdom and glory. Chapter 2 outlines Paul's determination when he came to Corinth to teach among them nothing except the Christ as the crucified one. This message was unbelievable and inconceivable to Paul's hearers, as his quote from Isaiah 64 verses 4 to 5 proves. But our sovereign God has His love and wisdom shared with His children, known partly now with the added promise that the joys and blessings of the kingdom age cannot be understood simply through words which would fail to describe that experience of being the Father's immortalised children. The Apostle Paul highlights the difference between natural and spiritual thinking, showing that the teaching via the Spirit of God is essential for true enlightenment. https://christadelphianvideo.org/christadelphian-daily-readings